Before we start going over the different types of buoys, we should go into detail about all the different ways a flashing light could work, or just a light on an aid to navigation could operate. Every light doesn't need to be unique, but it needs to be unique for its area, so you don't ever get confused. If you were to have a light here and a light here, you wouldn't want them to have light characteristics. You wouldn't want them to flash in any way that could be easily mistaken for one or the other. So you want them to be very clearly distinct, which is why there's a lot of different varieties of ways in which a light can flash or not flash. The simplest, obviously, is fixed. Well, before we do that, we'll just break this down. This section here just shows a visual representation of sort of over a period of time what you would see, whether the light would be on or off. Here's a quick explanation, and then this is the notation you would see on a chart describing a specific light whenever you found it. So first we have fixed. That doesn't require any explanation. It's just always on. It doesn't do anything. It just stays on all the time, and it's always notated with a little F. Next we get into, and I don't know why they started, well, I guess I do understand why they started with occulting, is because it's on more, but this is probably the most confusing type just because it's such a strange word. An occulting light is a light that is on for longer than it is off. So while it does turn off periodically, the vast majority of the time it is blinking. So it will be like on, off, such as that. And you can see that depicted here, where it's on for a decent period of time, off for a second or two, then on again. You can imagine this is probably, let's say, a length of 5 seconds. So this would be on for maybe 2, off, on, off, on. And it is labeled with a little OC. Next we have group occulting. It's where it gets a little harder to understand. Where you'll have 2 periods of off, or 2 or more periods of the light being turned off, contained quickly in succession, followed by a larger period where it's on again. So it'll be on, off, on, off. So instead of being 1 blink of off and then going back, it's just 2 blinks. And that's labeled with an occulting, and then how many times it turns off on any given occasion. Group occulting is when it turns off in different patterns, where it might at first blink off twice, and then it'll be on for a little bit, and then blink off once, and then be on for a little bit, and then repeat that cycle here, which is exactly what it shows here. It's on for a bit, off, on for a bit, off once, then on for a bit again. Then it goes off, on for a bit, off, on for a bit. So it's repeating this set of 2 times it turns off, waits a bit, turns off again, waits a bit, and then repeats the cycle. And you can see that displayed in the notation right here. Occulting 2 plus 1, meaning it's group occulting. It has a period of 2 off plus 1 more off after a quick pause. Next we have isophase. This is also relatively easy to understand. An isophase light is just on for as long total as it is off. They have the same length of time. So if it's on for a second, it's off for a second, on for a second, off for a second. Whatever that period may be can change, but if you were to add up the whole time that it's on and the whole time that it's off, they would be the same. It's labeled with ISO. Now we get into flashing lights, and these are actually the more common type than occulting. Occulting is not rare, but not as common to be seen. A flashing light is off more often than it is on. So the majority of the time you'll see nothing, and then it'll flash on, pause, flash, pause, flash. So like on, or on, off, like that. You can see here that technically single flashing, so just flashing at the normal speed, is 30 flashes per minute, meaning each flash should be about a second, or less than a second, You can imagine it being like a quarter second on, 3/4 of a second off, and so on. I think that would be 60, never mind. Next we go, we're going to skip over this because it makes more sense to move on to, where does it show it? Quick flashing. This is just when the period is a lot, or the I guess wavelength or frequency is a lot higher, so that it's going on and off at a much greater rapidity. Going to group flashing though, you can imagine it at the same speed as the single flashing, but it's doing the same group characteristics that the occulting lights were. But this time, you're counting the number of ons, not the number of offs. So it's on, off, on, off. You can see right there, labeled flashing 2. Composite group flashing, same principle. On, off for a little bit, on once, then off again. So you have 2 ons plus another on. Flashing 2 plus 1. Quick flashing we went over just because it's the faster form of normal flashing. Interrupted quick, this is the one that I think I got confused about when I saw it written on the chart during the chart overview video, because I've never actually seen this before. This is very uncommon, but I think it's relatively self-explanatory. It operates off of the normal speed of a quick flashing light, with a sudden pause at some point in the middle, and then continues. Morse code lights are interesting. You could probably argue that this is technically a group occulting light, but its exact pattern is mapped out to spell a letter or a series of letters in Morse code. In this case, this is Morse code alpha, short long. And you can see right here, it's written Morse alpha. So anytime you would see a light like this that blinks in some, I guess, when you first see it, you would think it's just some strange light pattern, because it won't always be this. It'll be whatever light it's whatever letter it's representing. If you were to write down that period of one short flash, then one much longer flash, and you were to look into your light list or to any reference guide for what Morse letters are, you would be able to find that this represents the letter alpha. Fixed and flashing, these are also pretty uncommon, but also relatively easy to understand. You could just have one light that's continuous and one light that's flashing, and for that matter, maybe it wouldn't be flashing, maybe it'd be quick flashing, group flashing. You could combine any of these two, though that's also something I haven't really seen before, labeled with. And I guess the label would just be both of them, both of their characteristics written in sequence. So first fixed and then flashing. If it was occulting and flashing, it would be OC, FL, though that would probably be really hard to distinguish. And then this, it's really hard to understand what the writing is here because the text is just so low quality, but this is a light that alternates its color in a certain sequence. These should be relatively common. I've seen them where it just rotates between red and white and green, whatever it might be. This one is alternating red and white. Having been to like older lighthouses before, it's interesting the setup they use, where they just have big filters that are on a spinning wheel surrounding the light, so they constantly spin over and shade that light whatever color they want it to be as it passes through the filter, and that filter could be multiple different colors. So those are all of the major types of light characteristics a buoy or a beacon or any aid to navigation might have. They will always be depicted on a chart, as you can see here, explaining what characteristics a specific aid to navigation may have. So you can see this one is isophase green, this one is Morse code alpha, this one is flashing green, this one is flashing in a group flashing 2 right there. Here's isophase, here's flashing red. and so on and so forth. And we'll get later why these different buoys have different characteristics. But it's just good to be able to read that notations and know what it means.